Okay, so today's review lecture is going to focus on what we covered in Unit 1, Lesson 2, which focused on economic choice, mainly opportunity cost as well. Things you want to be able to do by the time you finish this particular video, or you should have been able to do before coming here and you're looking for help, is define what choice is and explain why it's such an important component of economics, explain how incentives and utility influence people's economic choices, explain how trade-offs and opportunity costs factor into the decision-making process, and successfully complete a cost-benefit analysis. The last one is something that you'll have to do on your own, but we'll still talk about exactly what it is that you'd have to do inside of that to successfully pull that off. First of all, what factors might you weigh when making a decision? Well, those are pretty easy. We're going to look at incentives and utility. Incentives are basically the one that students struggle with the most. Incentives are things that are put in place to try and get you to do things that you would not normally do. Now, when you get old enough to go out and have enough money and buy a new car, or maybe even a used car, the dealer will oftentimes try and throw things in to try and make it more appealing for you to buy that car. So you might not have normally wanted to go out and buy a new car, but certain incentives like no money down, 0% financing, they'll pay your first 2 months of car payments, or in some cases some dealerships will offer oil changes for life for that particular car. Those are all things that they're trying to do to try and get you to come in and spend your money. Another way to look at incentives might be sales, things we talked about in class. How many times have you yourself, or perhaps someone you know, bought something simply because it was on sale? They wouldn't have normally bought it because it was full price, and they maybe perhaps couldn't have afforded it, but with it being on discount, they went ahead and offered you an incentive, a reason to buy it when you normally would not. A lot of things that we make decisions on are based on utility, and utility is talking about satisfaction. Now, it's not always going to be satisfaction. Not everybody likes to study, but you would benefit from studying from a class. But if you look at utility, there may not be any satisfaction with that. So while a lot of times people make decisions based off of utility, the satisfaction they will have from a choice or decision, they may not always base it off of that. So, let's get back to choice, talking about our first learning target, choice. Making a decision about things. Why is it so important to economics? Because everything is regarding choice. What are you going to do? Let's go back to our first lesson talking about how scarcity affects consumers and producers, because both of them have to make choices. They have to make choices about what are they going to use their limited resources on. For the consumer, what are you going to use your limited money on? Are you going to buy dinner at a fancy restaurant, or are you going to go ahead and buy maybe dinner at McDonald's off the dollar menu? Wait, no, dollar menus don't exist at McDonald's anymore. The value menu. Or do you maybe go the route of buying food from a grocery store and preparing it yourself? If you're a company, do you make, let's just say a car company, do you go ahead and start trying to make trucks even though you've never really made trucks? Or do you just stick with cars, or do you try and go and make something else? You don't have unlimited resources, so you have to make sure that you're making wise decisions, especially as a business. You don't want to make things that people don't want, and that make things that it won't get you a profit. You'll be out of business really quickly when you do that. Now, economizing is basically when you make a decision based off of what's the best combination of both cost and benefit. Now, no matter what choice you make, you're going to give something up. Some examples: sleep versus awake. So let's say you slept until noon on a Saturday. Well, what did it cost you? Well, it cost you all the things that you could have possibly been doing had you woke up by, say, 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning. Games versus studying. If I'm going to play some video games, that's obviously going to cost me when it comes to studying. Or, the other way around. If I'm going to spend some time studying for an exam or a quiz that might be coming up, then the things that I'm going to give up are video games. Work versus leisure. I come to work almost every single day. It's very rare that I'm out. One of the things that I give up when I do that is the ability to have leisure time, things that I want to do for fun. And then, of course, the other way, if I'm going to spend some extra time away from work, then doing leisure activities, then I have to give up work. And if I were in an hourly position, or let's say I ran out of sick days or things like that, then I would be giving up things like money that I would have associated with work. Some other things too, trade-offs. Now, trade-offs are when you do not have to make all or nothing decisions. So like in our previous examples where we're talking about video games and studying, So with that, imagine you have 4 hours. So then you're going to make some trade-offs here. You're going to make some decisions, some choices. My limited time, my scarce resource in this case would be time. So in this case, a trade-off would be maybe I do 3 hours of studying and 1 hour of video game. Of course, my opportunity cost in this is because I chose 3 hours of of studying, then my opportunity cost was 3 hours of video games. And then, of course, my decision to make 1 hour of video game, my opportunity cost was 1 hour of studying. The other thing we need to make sure we take a look at too is the opportunity cost is always the second best option. The thing that you would be doing if you weren't doing what you chose to do. So like for example, the stuff I put on the board when we were going over this in class, I had ranked 4 or 5 things that I would like to do after class in order. The number one thing was to spend time with my kids. The second thing was to play video games. The third thing was maybe go to the gym. Then there was a fourth and a fifth item. But when we talk about opportunity cost, it's the next best thing. So the second thing on my list for that example, which was play video games, that would have been my opportunity cost in that particular scenario. Some other things, other terms we need to go ahead and be familiar with. We've got marginal benefit, marginal cost. Now, what I talked about in class is anytime we talk about marginal, it's one more. So when I'm talking about marginal benefit, what is the benefit of consuming one more of that good or service? Marginal cost, pretty easy. What is the cost of consuming one more of that good or service? So if I bought one hot dog for $1, what would be the marginal cost of one more hot dog? Well, it'd be $1. So some cost benefit analysis as well. So those are some things that now your book is going to sit there and say, oh, everybody has a cost benefit analysis through a decision making grid. You know, we joked around about that in class. I don't ever sit down at home and make out a decision making grid, but I actually go ahead and try and do that inside of my head when I make some decisions. So let's go ahead and give you an example of some of the things that you might actually go through in a decision making grid. So right here we've got the decision-making grid that was actually in your textbook. So we can see on our left side we have choices. So those are all how many hours of extra study you have. Your benefit, that's going to be going through the center, grades ranging from D to an A. An opportunity cost is what we're talking about here, 1 hour with friends through 6 hours with friends. So you can see here that it basically sets it up in using the principles we talked about before. I have a choice, so this is the decision I made, hour of extra study. The next best option for me is going to be hours of times that I could have had with friends. Now the benefits in here, that is how much they're going to benefit, obviously, with each decision. So if they know right off the bat, if they study for an hour in the historically they study for an hour, they get a D. So this would be one of the ways that they go ahead and set this up. Again, this is just for an example. There could be benefits that are described using other things. Like when I saw students making their cost-benefit analysis in class for their decision-making grid, they were using cheer practice. So, 15 minutes of cheer practice allows me to do this. Just different things. It all is going to depend on what it is you want to be able to do. So some examples that we talked about in class. We talked about what is the opportunity cost for 5 hours of extra study. If we look all the way across the the rows, we're going to see it's 5 hours with friends. One of the things that students struggle with, this isn't the exact example, but if I'm at a C, what is my marginal cost of going from a C to a B plus? And that's going to be 2 hours with friends, because I'm already at 2 hours when I have a C and I want to get to a B plus. So it's going to make me go 1 more hour would give me a B. That's 3 hours with friends. 1 more hour after that would be 4 hours with friends. So there's only a difference of 2 hours. Now what students tend to do is they confuse or they forget what's being asked. I say marginal, and most students will try and tell me what the opportunity cost is. That's where you have to really look at what exactly is the question asking you. If it's asking for opportunity cost, by all means, go ahead, do opportunity cost. But when we're talking marginal cost, we're talking about what's the difference between my 2 choices. So hopefully that helps you out. Hopefully you can do all of the things that we had pointed out in the beginning when we had talked about your learning objectives, your learning targets, things you want to be able to complete and be able to master by the time a test rolls around, and especially be able to master after this video is over with. Hopefully you found it helpful. You can always go back and review the pieces you need, or visit me for office hours if this still was not of any help to you.